My WIFESALPHA boss tried TOSTEAL my wife, and humiliate me. I took back control. Have you ever been betrayed by the person you trusted the most? What if that person turned out to be your wife's boss? In WIFESALPHA boss tried TOSTEAL my wife, and humiliate me. I took back control. I'm about to share the shocking moment I caught them red-handed. You won't believe how it all unraveled. My life turned upside down in an instant. Stay tuned to find out what happens next, because you won't expect the twist that's coming. I had never been one to attend these corporate events. The glitzy hotels, the fine wine, the jazz that was always playing in the background, it was all too much. I much preferred the solitude of my office, a good book in hand, or the quiet comfort of home. But tonight, I had no choice. I had to be there. I had to play the part of the dutiful employee, the husband who was supposed to smile, shake hands, and make small talk. There was a part of me that always felt like I was faking it at these events, pretending to be someone I wasn't. But hey, this was part of the deal, right? Represent the company, make connections, smile through the discomfort. That's what I kept telling myself as I stood at the bar, nursing my whiskey, scanning the crowd. It wasn't long before I saw her, Isabella. She looked stunning, of course. That wasn't new. She always did, but tonight something felt off. Her laughter, the way she tossed her head back just a little too far, the way she seemed so at ease with Noah. My stomach twisted. I hadn't seen him in a while, but I recognized him instantly. Noah. The guy everyone seemed to gravitate towards. Tall, broad-shouldered, older, with that kind of effortless charm that could make anyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. And tonight, he had Isabella's full attention. I watched from across the room, my fingers tightening around my glass as I tried to keep my emotions in check. I should have known something was wrong as soon as I saw them talking. But it wasn't just that. It was the way she was hanging on every word he said. It was the way Noah placed his hand on the small of her back, casually, like it was nothing. And Isabella? She didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned in, laughing, completely absorbed in whatever he was saying. I could feel the tension in my chest building up with every second. My heart was hammering in my chest, as I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe I was just imagining things. But deep down, I knew something was off. I forced myself to walk across the room, my legs moving mechanically, like I was on autopilot. I tried to swallow the anger building inside me, but it was getting harder. Noah saw me coming and, like he always did, flashed that damn perfect smile. "Brandon! Great to see you. How's the night treating you?" he said, his voice smooth, like it always was. I barely managed to nod, trying not to let the venom I was feeling seep into my voice. "It's fine," I said, as casually as I could, even though my insides were screaming. I glanced at Isabella, and there it was. The confirmation. She didn't even acknowledge me. Not even a glance. Her eyes never left Noah. I wasn't even sure she realized I was standing right there. The room suddenly felt too small. I could feel the eyes of others on us, whispers starting, questions in their gaze. Was this what we had become? Was this where we were headed? My mind was racing, my heart pounding, but I refused to let it show. Not yet. Not in front of everyone. I was better than that. But damn, it was hard. I finally spoke. "Isabella," I said, my voice cutting through the conversation. She turned to me slowly, her eyes briefly flicking over to mine before narrowing, her face a perfect mask of annoyance and disbelief. "What is it, Brandon?" she snapped, her tone sharp, like I was interrupting something important. Her voice carried, and I could feel the weight of it, the sting of it, like a slap to the face. She didn't even bother to lower her voice. Didn't care who was listening. I was nothing. Invisible. "Can't you see I'm in the middle of something?" she continued, dismissing me like I was an inconvenience. My jaw tightened, but I forced myself to smile. Cold, controlled. I wasn't going to let her see the storm that was brewing inside me. Not yet. "Yeah, I can see that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though the words burned in my throat. "I can also see the way you're flirting with him right in front of me." The moment I said it, the entire room seemed to freeze. Her face changed. Just for a split second something flickered in her eyes, something like embarrassment. Noah shifted uncomfortably, But that moment passed quickly. She recovered, her mask back in place. Flirting? She repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Don't be ridiculous, Brandon. We're just talking. Talking? Is that what she called it? I wasn't going to back down now. Not in front of everyone. Talking. I echoed, my voice rising enough that a few people nearby started to look. Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a hell of a lot like flirting. She didn't even flinch. If you can't handle a harmless conversation, maybe you should leave, she said, her voice cutting through me like a blade. Those words, they stung. They hit me right in the gut. I forced another smile, but it was harder this time. Colder. Consider it done, sweetheart, I said, my voice steady, even though I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me. I didn't wait for another word. I turned on my heel and walked away, the murmurs of the crowd following me. I didn't care what they thought. I didn't care what she thought. This wasn't about them. It wasn't about appearances anymore. It was about me, about reclaiming what was mine, about taking control of my life for once. As I walked out of the ballroom, the anger that had been simmering inside me turned into something colder, something final. This was it. Isabella had made her choice. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The night air hit me as I stepped outside, and I could finally breathe. But it wasn't a relief, it was a sign. A sign that everything was changing. My mind was racing, thinking of all the ways I could make her and Noah feel the weight of what they'd done. She had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let her forget it. The calmness that settled over me was strange, but it was real. It was the calm before the storm, and I was ready. I wasn't the fool anymore. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me. I got in my car, the engine roaring to life as I pulled out of the parking lot. This was just the beginning. There was so much more to come. And when it was all said and done, I would be the one walking away, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their shattered world. The next few days passed in a blur, each one dragging by like a long, heavy fog that wouldn't lift. I could hardly focus at work. My mind kept drifting back to that night. The way Isabella dismissed me, the coldness in her voice. I tried to tell myself that maybe it was just a bad moment. Maybe I was overreacting, letting my insecurities get the best of me. But deep down, I knew better. I knew what I had seen. I knew what was happening, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. The rage, the hurt, the disbelief, it was all there, simmering just below the surface, waiting to break free. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep my cool, keep my distance, focus on the things that mattered, my work, my routine, my life. But every time I saw her face, every time I caught a glimpse of Noah's name on her phone, every time I heard their laughter echoing in my mind, it was like a wave crashing over me, pulling me under. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. I felt like I was losing control of everything, like I was trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. It didn't help that she kept calling. Every time the phone buzzed, my stomach turned. I'd stare at the screen, my finger hovering over the answer button, but I could never bring myself to pick up. What was I supposed to say? What was there left to say? She had already made her choice. She had already shown me who she really was. Every call, every message, every word was just another attempt to make it right, another attempt to pretend like none of it had happened. But it had, and there was no going back from that. But then, there was a shift. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to decide what our future looked like. I wasn't going to play the fool anymore. No more pretending. No more passive acceptance of the way things were. I wasn't going to be the guy who sat back and let everyone walk all over me. I was done with that. The anger that had been burning in my chest started to feel like something else. Something colder. I had been angry, sure. But now it was different. Now it was a calm, controlled rage. A desire to make them both feel the weight of what they had done. I couldn't let this slide. I couldn't let her go off with him like everything was fine. I wasn't just going to let her get away with treating me like I didn't matter, like I was invisible. I went back to that night, over and over again. I replayed every detail in my mind, the way Noah smiled at me when I walked into the room, the way Isabella didn't even acknowledge me, the anger I felt when I saw them together, the way she barely spared me a glance, the way she shut me out completely. It hurt, sure, but it also sparked something inside me. Something that told me it was time to take control. It was time to make a move. I started small. Little things. Changing the locks on the doors. Freezing our joint accounts. She wouldn't know it yet, but it was happening. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum. I was going to make sure she felt it. She thought she could just walk away from me without consequences. Well, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her think she could walk back into my life whenever she wanted. The first time I saw her after that night was surreal. She showed up at the door, all sweet smiles and apologetic eyes, like nothing had happened. She walked in like she owned the place, like she was entitled to be there, to be a part of my life. It made my skin crawl. But I didn't let it show. Not yet. I had to play this smart. I had to be calculated. If I let her see how much it hurt, if I let her see my weakness, she would win. And I wasn't going to let that happen. "Brandon, I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I stood there, watching her, feeling every ounce of that anger build up again. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything. The lies, the betrayal, the disrespect. She had already made her choice. And now, she was trying to make it all go away with a few simple words. Sorry didn't cut it anymore. Sorry wasn't going to fix this. You're sorry, I repeated, my voice cold, sharp. You think that makes everything okay? You think you can just apologize and everything goes back to normal? She flinched, her eyes flicking away, but she quickly regained her composure. I know I hurt you, Brandon. And I'm so sorry for that. But Noah and we were just talking. It wasn't like you think. Talking. It always came back to that word. She had a way of twisting everything, didn't she? Talking? I echoed, my voice rising just enough to make her stop in her tracks. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm standing, it looked a hell of a lot like flirting. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I could see the faintest flicker of guilt, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by that familiar coldness. I'm not going to sit here and let you accuse me of something I didn't do. She snapped, her voice sharp, defensive. You're just being paranoid, Brandon. You've always been like this. Just being paranoid. That stung more than I cared to admit. I had spent years trusting her, believing in us. And now, here she was, throwing it all away like it didn't even matter. I could feel the control slipping through my fingers, but I wasn't going to lose it. Not this time. No, Isabella, I said, my voice low but firm. I'm not paranoid, I'm just not blind anymore. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like everything is fine, like everything you've done hasn't changed everything between us. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she stiffened. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't want to face the truth. And she definitely didn't want me to call her out on it. But it was too late. She had already crossed that line, and now, she was going to feel it. I'm done, Isabella, I said, my words deliberate, each one cutting through the silence like a knife. I'm done pretending. I'm done being the guy you can walk all over whenever you feel like it. You made your choice. And I'm making mine. Her eyes widened for just a moment, and I saw something flicker in them: surprise, maybe shock. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected me to fight back. But I wasn't about to sit here and let her walk all over me anymore. I'm not coming back to this, I said, my voice steady, cold. And I'm not going to let you manipulate me into thinking I'm the one at fault here. She opened her mouth, like she was about to say something, but I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want to hear her pretend like this was all just a misunderstanding. The truth was staring us both in the face, and there was no hiding from it anymore. This is it, Isabella, I said. My words final. I'm done. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the doorway, her mouth open, her eyes wide with shock. The relief that washed over me was strange, almost surreal. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment I took control back. But as I stepped out into the cool night air, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this. That there was still something I needed to do. Something that would make them both feel the weight of what they had done. It wasn't enough to just walk away. It wasn't enough to just be angry. I needed to make sure that Noah understood exactly what he had done. And I needed to make Isabella feel the consequences of her betrayal. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. And I wasn't going to stop until I had them both right where I wanted them. They had taken everything from me, But now, I was going to make sure they knew exactly what it felt like to lose it all. And when I was done, I would be the one walking away, leaving them behind in the dust. Okay, you've seen what led up to this, but here's the big question. What's going to happen when I take matters into my own hands? Can you guess how this revenge will unfold? Do you think I'll truly get the justice I deserve? Or is there more to this than I've let on? Drop a comment 1. If you think I've got the upper hand, comment 2. If you think there's more to Noah's game. Let's see if you can predict what's next. You have 10 seconds to comment. Start nows. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for taking the time to comment. Now, let's dive back into this thrilling story. In the days that followed, my mind raced with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I had spent so long letting things slip by, letting Isabella and Noah take what they wanted from me. But now I could finally think straight. The anger that had been boiling inside me no longer felt like an uncontrolled fire. It was a slow burn, steady and sure, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't just going to sit around and hope they'd realize the damage they'd done. No, I was done being the guy who just took it. I was going to make them both regret it, and I would do it on my terms. I started with the house. The locks were an easy change. I didn't need to ask for permission or explanations. It was mine, and I was taking back control. I could already picture the look on her face when she tried to get back in, thinking nothing had changed. Her surprise, her frustration, it was going to be sweet. As I sat in my office that day, going over the details, making plans, I realized how deeply this betrayal had cut me. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about respect. It was about everything she had taken from me, everything I had given to her, only to have it thrown back in my face like it didn't matter. I wasn't going to let her walk into my life again like nothing happened. And Noah? That smug bastard was next. I knew how he operated. I had watched him for years, always the smooth talker, always the one in control. But now, I had the upper hand. I knew he didn't expect this. Hell, I don't even think he expected me to fight back. But I wasn't the weak man he thought I was. I wasn't the guy who let things slide anymore. The days were filled with small moves, but they were calculated. I contacted my financial manager and froze the joint accounts. All the money we had was in limbo, and she wouldn't be able to touch a penny without my say. The feeling that swept over me as I hit the freeze button was nothing short of exhilarating. I was taking back what was mine, and I wasn't going to feel guilty for it. She didn't get to waltz in and out of my life whenever she wanted, taking everything with her as she went. But this wasn't just about the money or the house. This was about revenge. I had already made the decision to expose Noah, but I couldn't do it yet. I needed to gather more. I needed to learn about the man who had taken what was mine. I had no doubt he had been playing the same game with Isabella that he'd been playing with everyone else. But now, the tables were turned, and I was the one in control. I knew how to dig. I knew how to find things. It wasn't about hacking or anything illegal, but about knowing where to look and what to look for. Noah's social media was a treasure trove. His connections, his family, there were so many cracks in his facade, and it didn't take long to start putting the pieces together. That's when I found it. His perfect little life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. He had a wife, 2 kids, a house in the suburbs. The man who had been acting like a bachelor, like he had no responsibilities, was living a double life, playing both sides like a pro. But I knew the truth now, and I wasn't going to let him keep hiding behind his perfect image. As the pieces came together, so did my resolve. I wasn't going to just confront him in person. That would be too easy. No, I was going to make sure everyone knew who he really was. The man who had come into my life, destroyed my marriage, and thought he could walk away without consequences. He was about to be exposed. I wasn't going to let him hide behind his lies anymore. The phone call came the next day. I could hear the tension in Noah's voice the moment I answered. He didn't know it yet, but his world was about to crumble. "Brandon," he said, his voice trying to sound calm, collected. "We need to talk." I could almost hear the smugness in his voice, the same attitude he had when he thought he was untouchable. "Talk?" I repeated, my voice steady, but it cut through the line like a knife. "I've been waiting for this conversation, Noah. But I don't think you're ready for it." There was silence on the other end. I could almost picture him trying to figure out what the hell was going on. But he had no idea what was coming. Listen, I don't know what you think you know, but you don't know anything, do you? I cut him off, my voice a low growl now. You thought you could just take everything, walk away with my wife, and get away with it. But that's not how this works. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, like he was processing the fact that I knew everything. And I wasn't going to let him out of it. You think you can keep living this double life, Noah? You think you can just walk around with my wife and act like nothing's going to happen? Well, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. I could almost hear his breath catch. He wasn't expecting this. I wasn't the guy he thought I was anymore. He didn't know it yet, but he was already losing everything. What do you mean? He asked, his voice tight. Oh, I think you know exactly what I mean, I said. The words coming out colder than I intended. You've been lying to everyone. You've been hiding behind your perfect little image, your charming persona, while playing with my life like it didn't matter. Well, it matters now. You're about to find out just how much it matters. There was no apology, no excuses, just a long pause, a kind of quiet desperation on his end. Brandon, he said, but his voice was different now. It was small. We can work this out. Work it out? I repeated, my voice rising now. There's no working this out, Noah. You've crossed a line. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it didn't happen. I wasn't playing anymore. This was my moment, and I was taking it. You think you're untouchable, but you're not, I said, my voice steady, cold. You've made your bed, and now you'll lie in it. I hung up before he could say anything else. It wasn't worth hearing his excuses. The damage was done. And now, I was going to make sure he paid the price. This was just the beginning. I had everything I needed, and I wasn't going to stop until I had them both exactly where I wanted them. The days after the call with Noah felt like I was moving through thick fog. I could feel the tension building inside me, the anticipation of what was coming next. I knew I had made my move, but there was still so much to be done. I wasn't just going to let Noah slip through the cracks. No, he needed to understand exactly what he had done. The phone call had been the first step. But now, I had to make sure the rest of the world knew about him. I wasn't going to let him keep hiding behind that perfect facade of his. He had fooled everyone, including Isabella, and I had a feeling he thought I was just going to fade away into the background, like the weak man I used to be. But he couldn't have been more wrong. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. It was the first real taste of power I'd had in weeks. When I hung up the phone, a strange calm settled over me, like a wave of clarity that swept away all the confusion and doubt that had been clouding my mind. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to be a bystander anymore. I was going to make them both feel the consequences of their actions. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing this for every moment they had taken from me, for every laugh they had shared at my expense, for every time I had swallowed my pride and let it go. No more. I started by gathering everything I could. I knew I had to be prepared if I was going to bring him down. I had to know everything. I'd been watching him for months, studying his every move, and now the pieces were falling into place. Noah had no idea what was coming. The perfect life he had been living, his charmed existence, where everyone saw him as the successful businessman, the charming bachelor, was about to come crashing down. And I was the one who was going to make sure it happened. I went through his social media, tracking down his connections, piecing together the bits of his life that he thought no one would ever find. It wasn't hard to see the cracks in his story. The perfect image he had built for himself, the one everyone saw at work, at parties, was just that, an image. A lie. And I had the proof. The more I dug, the more disgusted I became. He had been living a double life, a life full of secrets, and I was going to be the one to expose it. His wife, his kids, the perfect little house in the suburbs, none of it was real. It was all part of the game. A game he thought he was winning, but he was about to lose everything. But it wasn't just about Noah. It wasn't just about bringing him down. It was about Isabella too. She had made her choice. She had thrown me aside like I didn't matter. And for what? For a man who wasn't even real? For a man who had been lying to her just as much as he had been lying to me? I wasn't going to let her get away with it. She thought she could have her cake and eat it too. But I was done being the guy who let her have everything while I got nothing. I had already changed the locks. frozen the accounts, and started digging into Noah's life. But I wasn't done yet. There was one last piece of the puzzle I needed to finish this. And I wasn't going to wait. When I called Miranda the woman Noah had been hiding behind the curtain of his perfect little life, I felt the weight of the decision settle in my chest. She had no idea what was coming. She had no idea that her perfect husband, the man she trusted, the man she thought she knew, was a fraud. I had to make her understand. I had to make her see that she had been played, just like I had been. And when I made the call, I could hear the hesitation in her voice before she even spoke. "Brandon?" she asked, her voice tight, as if she already knew something was wrong. "What's this about?" "It's about Noah," I said, my voice steady, but filled with purpose. "I know what he's been doing. I know about the affair with Isabella. And I have the proof. I'm sending you everything you need to know. You deserve the truth." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her processing the words, trying to make sense of it. She didn't deserve this, but I wasn't going to hold back. She had every right to know. She had every right to understand the man she had married wasn't the man he appeared to be. Miranda's voice cracked, the realization settling in. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I replied, my voice cold and calculated. "I'll send everything I've found. You'll see for yourself. You'll know exactly what kind of man you've been living with." Another pause. Then, her voice, quieter, almost resigned. "I need to see this. I need to know everything. You'll get it tonight," I said, hanging up the phone. That was it. The first step was done. I had given her the truth. I had opened her eyes, just like I had opened mine. The next few days felt like they were moving in slow motion. The anger that had been a fire inside me was now a quiet, controlled force. Every move I made felt calculated, like I was playing a game, and I was determined to win. I couldn't let them think they could just walk away from this. They had made their choices, but I wasn't going to let them go unpunished. Noah had tried to call, of course. He didn't know it yet, but everything was about to fall apart. The truth was already out, and he was going to pay for everything. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't need to hear him beg. I didn't need to hear him try to talk his way out of this. He had done enough damage already. It was too late. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. When the files came through, I opened them, one by one, poring over the details. It was all there. Every lie, every secret. His double life was exposed, and there was no way for him to hide from it now. It was perfect. This was the final piece. Noah's perfect world was about to crumble. And I was going to be the one to watch it all fall apart. The days after the call with Miranda were a strange kind of hell. I knew what I had set into motion, and as each hour passed, it felt like the walls were slowly closing in around me. I could feel the weight of every decision pressing down harder with every breath I took. Noah thought he could continue his life without consequences, hiding behind a mask of lies and charm. Isabella, too, thought she could walk back into my life whenever it suited her. But both of them were wrong. They had made their choices, and now it was time for them to face the fallout. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't about getting back at them for their betrayal, though the sting of their actions still burned deep. It was about control, taking back the power they had stolen from me. And I was going to make sure that neither of them would ever forget what they had done. I couldn't afford to show weakness now. The plans I had set in motion couldn't be stopped. There was no turning back. The call with Miranda had been the first crack in the perfect little world Noah had created. I could hear it in her voice, the disbelief, the hurt, the shock. I knew how this would play out. The more I exposed, the more the walls around Noah's perfect life would crumble. He had no idea that I had already turned his world upside down. His perfect little life, his facade, was about to come crashing down, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The next day, I made my move. It wasn't going to be just about exposing the affair anymore. That wasn't enough. I was going to dismantle his entire life, piece by piece. I knew where his secrets were buried, and I was going to dig them up, drag them into the light, and watch as they destroyed him. The truth was on my side now, and there was no way he could escape it. He thought he was untouchable, but I was about to show him how wrong he was. I reached out to the people who could help me get the information I needed. I wasn't going to do this alone. I didn't need to. I had connections, and I wasn't afraid to use them. Every email, every text, Every conversation was another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Noah had been careful, but I was more careful. I didn't miss a thing. His social media, his financial records, his relationships, everything he had built was a house of cards. I was just waiting for the right moment to blow it all down. I could feel the excitement building inside me, like I was on the edge of something big. This wasn't just about exposing Noah, it was about taking everything back. The money, the power, the control. He thought he could just waltz into my life and take what was mine. But I wasn't the guy who was going to sit back and let that happen anymore. I was going to make sure Noah felt the full force of everything he had done. And I would make sure that Isabella felt the same. Miranda had received the files I sent her, and I could tell from her response that she was already starting to process what I had shown her. I wasn't sure if she would forgive Noah. Honestly, I didn't care. I didn't need her to side with me. I didn't need anyone to understand. What mattered was that Noah's secrets were out in the open. He could run, he could hide, but the truth had a way of catching up with people. And it was only a matter of time before the people who mattered, the ones who had been fooled by him, started asking questions. As I sat in my office that evening, the phone rang again. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. Noah. His voice came through the receiver, smooth and calculated, but there was a tremor in it. Now, something he hadn't had before. He was scared. I could hear it in his breath. He was trying to regain control, but he had lost it. And now it was my turn. Brandon, he said, his voice low, almost pleading. We need to talk. I don't know what you think you know, but don't try to talk your way out of this, Noah. I cut him off, my voice steady, but filled with the weight of everything I had been holding back. You think you can just walk away from this? You think you can just throw everything we had in my face and then act like it's nothing? Well, it's not nothing, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. There was a long pause on the other end. I could almost hear him scrambling, trying to figure out what to say next. But there was no way out. I had all the cards now. Listen, he said, his voice cracking a little. I don't know what you want, but I want you to understand exactly what's happening. Noah, I interrupted, my voice rising now, sharp and unforgiving. I've spent enough time in your shadow, letting you walk all over me. I'm done with that. I know about the lies, the double life you've been living, and I'm going to make sure the world knows about it too. I could feel the air shift on the other end. I could hear him trying to keep his composure, but it was slipping. Brandon, please, he begged, his voice desperate now. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice low, almost a whisper. You've been lying to everyone, hiding behind a perfect little mask. But now, that mask is coming off. And when it does, there's nowhere for you to hide. I could feel the tension building in my chest. The satisfaction of knowing I had him exactly where I wanted him. I'm going to make sure everyone knows who you really are, Noah, I said, my voice firm, final. And when it's all said and done, I'll be the one walking away, not you. He was silent for a long time. And when he finally spoke, his voice was almost inaudible, like he was choking on his words. Brandon, don't do this. Please. I already have, I said, and with that, I hung up. As I set the phone down, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace settle over me. This was it. I had taken back control. And now, nothing was going to stop me. The storm was coming, and Noah and Isabella were going to feel every drop of it. I had made my decision. And now, it was time to watch everything they had worked so hard to build come crashing down. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly, but everything was already set in motion. As soon as I hung up with Noah, I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. It wasn't about just exposing him or getting back at him anymore. It was about making sure he truly felt the consequences of what he had done. He thought he could destroy everything I had worked for. Thought he could just slide into my life and take what was mine without a single repercussion. But now, he was going to learn just how wrong he was. I spent the next few days in a blur of work, meetings, and carefully calculated moves. Each task was just another step in my plan. I wasn't just sitting back anymore, hoping they would somehow realize the mistake they had made. I was taking control, one move at a time. I knew I had to be patient. This wasn't something that would happen overnight. But every piece of evidence I gathered, every conversation I had, Every document I uncovered, it all pushed me closer to the endgame. And once it was all out in the open, once the truth was out there for everyone to see, Noah's life would be ruined. And Isabella? She would never look at me the same way again. I knew I had to confront Noah in person. The time for phone calls and quiet digs was over. He needed to see me, face to face, and know that everything he had been hiding was about to come crashing down. I'd already laid the groundwork. Miranda had received everything I sent her, and she was starting to piece it all together. But I wasn't going to stop there. No, I was going to take everything Noah thought he knew and turn it upside down. I needed him to understand the magnitude of what he had done. So, I arranged the meeting. I made sure I had all the facts, all the evidence, all the proof that would destroy him. He didn't even know what was coming. He thought I was just another angry husband venting his frustrations, but I wasn't. I was a man with a plan, and this wasn't just about anger anymore. This was about justice. This was about making sure Noah never walked away from this unscathed. When I arrived at the office building, I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I wasn't nervous, not in the traditional sense. But there was a kind of adrenaline coursing through me, a buzz in the air that I couldn't ignore. Everything was moving so fast, but I was in control now. I wasn't the guy who had stood by quietly, swallowing my pride while they took what was mine. I had been that guy, sure, but not anymore. I was different now. I walked up to the door of Noah's office and paused for a moment before knocking. My mind raced with the knowledge that everything I had been working toward was about to come to a head. When Noah opened the door, his usual calm, confident demeanor was gone. His smile faltered for a split second, just enough to let me know he knew something was off. But he quickly recovered, of course. That's what he did best. He smiled at me like we were old friends, like we were just going to talk it out, like everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. It had never been fine. "Brandon," he said, his voice smooth but tight, "what's going on? I didn't expect to see you here." I didn't smile back. I didn't offer a handshake or make any small talk. Instead, I just stepped into his office and closed the door behind me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low, controlled. There was no room for pleasantries. This wasn't a conversation I was going to let him twist or spin. This was my moment, and I was going to make sure he knew it. Noah took a step back, his eyes flicking toward the desk, then back at me. His body language shifted just enough to tell me he was uncomfortable. I knew he wasn't used to being in this position, where he was the one on the defensive. It was a feeling I had gotten all too familiar with over the past few weeks, and now it was his turn to feel it. "What do you mean, Brandon?" he asked, his voice betraying just a hint of panic. "What's going on?" I didn't wait for him to finish. I had no interest in hearing any more of his excuses. "You know exactly what I mean, Noah," I said, my voice rising just enough for him to feel the weight of my words. "You've been lying to everyone. You've been playing both of us, Isabella and me. And now it's time for you to answer for it." He blinked, the shock momentarily freezing him in place. But then, just as quickly, he recovered, masking his discomfort with the same charm he had used all these years. "I don't know what you think you know, but you've got it all wrong. This isn't what you think. I never." "Oh, don't give me that," I snapped, cutting him off. My patience had worn thin. "I know everything. The affair with Isabella, the lies you've been telling your wife, the double life you've been living. Do you really think I'm stupid?" I stepped closer, letting the anger I had been holding in simmer just beneath the surface. "You thought you could get away with it, but not anymore. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." Noah's confident mask cracked just slightly. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes now, the way his shoulders tensed. He wasn't so sure of himself anymore. "You can't," he started, but I wasn't done. "I can," I said, my voice steady, deadly. "And I will. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. Everyone who matters, everyone in your world. I'm not going to let you hide anymore." For the first time since I had entered the room, Noah's calm demeanor completely shattered. He looked like a man who had just realized the full extent of his situation. I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. "Brandon, please," he begged, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "This is a mistake. You don't understand. We can work this out." I took a step back, letting the silence hang in the air between us. "There's no working this out, Noah," I said, my tone final. You made your choices, and now you're going to live with them. I'm done playing your game. He didn't say anything after that. There was nothing left for him to say. He knew he had lost. And I knew I had won. I turned to leave, but before I did, I gave him one last glance, one last reminder of the destruction he had set into motion. This is only the beginning, Noah, I said. When I'm done, you'll wish you'd never crossed me. I walked out of the office, my step steady, my heart pounding in my chest. Everything had changed. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about making sure I took control of my life again. And Noah? He had no idea what was coming for him. The day of the confrontation with Noah was something I had been anticipating for weeks. And when it finally came, it felt surreal. I had spent so much time planning, so much time working through every detail in my head. I thought I would feel satisfaction, maybe even a sense of triumph. But instead, there was a strange, unsettling calm that washed over me. I had done it. I had taken control. But now, standing in front of Noah, the truth that I had been hiding from myself for so long was hitting me hard. I walked out of the building with the weight of everything pressing down on me. There was no going back. I had crossed the line, and everything that followed would be a result of that decision. The moment I entered that office, I knew it would change things forever. And I had made my choice. I wasn't going to let Noah walk away unscathed, and I wasn't going to let Isabella think she could return to me after what had happened. No. They both needed to feel the full impact of their betrayal. But as I drove away, I found myself feeling empty. Was this it? Was this all there was to it? The anger, the hurt, the pain, they had driven me to this point. But now that I had done what I came to do, I wasn't sure how to move forward. I had fought back. I had taken my power back. But now what? I spent the next few days in a haze. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, and I was left with the aftermath. I had exposed Noah, had made sure everyone knew the truth about the double life he had been living. I had done my part, but there was still so much left to do. The real work was just beginning. Now, I had to face the consequences, both for myself and for them. I knew that things couldn't go back to the way they were. I couldn't go back to being the man I had been before everything fell apart. But there was no other choice. I had already burned those bridges. Miranda called me a few days after the confrontation, and I could hear the change in her voice. She had been shaken, obviously. The truth had a way of doing that to people. And now she knew just how deep the lies went. But what struck me the most was the sound of regret in her voice. It was the same sound I had heard from Isabella when she realized that she couldn't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be the same. It was too late for all of us. I'm meeting with a lawyer, Miranda said, her voice almost a whisper. I don't know what to do, but I can't pretend anymore. I didn't say much. There was nothing left to say. I understand, I replied. Take care of yourself, Miranda. As I ended the call, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen to her now. She had been as much a victim of Noah's lies as I had, and now she was stuck in the same mess. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not in the way I thought I might. This wasn't about sympathy anymore. It was about survival. And she, like me, had to figure out how to live with the wreckage. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, messages, and emails. It was like the whole world was unraveling, and I was standing right in the middle of it, trying to make sense of what was left. I couldn't focus on work. I couldn't focus on anything. All I could think about was how everything had fallen apart. How my life had been turned upside down by people I thought I could trust. But more than that, I was haunted by the thought that maybe this wasn't enough. Maybe no matter how much I did, I would never get back what I had lost. Noah, of course, wasn't done yet. He tried to reach out to me again, his messages more desperate than before. But I didn't answer. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of thinking he could just apologize and make it all go away. It wasn't that simple. It wasn't that easy. He had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let him come crawling back like nothing had happened. He had no idea what kind of storm he had unleashed, and now he was going to have to live with the consequences. As for Isabella, I hadn't heard from her in days. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or angry. Part of me wanted to hear from her, wanted to know if she regretted what had happened, if she was sorry for the way she had treated me. But another part of me knew that it didn't matter anymore. It didn't matter if she apologized, didn't matter if she promised things would be different. She had made her choice. She had shown me who she really was. And that was a woman I couldn't trust, no matter how much I might have wanted to. I couldn't keep living in the past. But moving forward seemed impossible. The pain was still there, gnawing at me. A constant reminder of the betrayal. Of the lies. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow failed. I had won the battle, sure. But at what cost? I had destroyed the only family I had left. And I wasn't sure if it had been worth it. But even as I questioned everything, there was a part of me that couldn't help but feel like I had done the right thing. I had taken control of my life again. And maybe, just maybe, that was all I could do. Maybe it wasn't about revenge or payback. Maybe it was about finding a way to stand on my own 2 feet again, to walk away from the wreckage and find something new. But for now, all I could do was wait. Wait for the storm to pass, for the dust to settle. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being the victim. It was time to rebuild, and this time, I was going to do it on my terms. I had been waiting for the moment when everything would come crashing down. But when it finally did, I wasn't prepared for how much it would consume me. The calm I had felt in the days following my confrontation with Noah had evaporated, leaving me with a gnawing sense of emptiness. I had made my move, exposed the truth, and yet there was this constant ache in my chest, a reminder that everything I thought I knew had been shattered. There was no going back. The lies had been pulled out into the open, and I had no idea what to do with the wreckage left behind. For days, I sat in my office, staring at the piles of paperwork that no longer seemed important. My phone had been blowing up with messages mostly from Noah, but there were some from people I hadn't heard from in years, all curious about the chaos I had stirred up. The whispers started fast, like wildfire, spreading through our circle faster than I could keep up with. I knew it was only a matter of time before Noah's perfect image would be destroyed. But there was something so unsettling about seeing it happen. Something that gnawed at my insides and left me questioning everything I had done. Was this really justice? Or had I just taken everything and turned it into something unrecognizable? I wasn't sure what I was looking for anymore. When I picked up my phone to respond to one of the countless messages, it wasn't the feeling of victory. I expected it was dread. Every conversation, every move I made, felt like another step deeper into this dark hole I had created. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal that had driven me to expose Noah, it was all still there. But now it felt empty. It felt like it didn't matter how much I exposed, how much I tore down his life. It wouldn't change what had happened. It wouldn't bring me back to the man I had been before all of this. The phone call with Miranda had only made it worse. She sounded lost, confused, torn between the man she had married and the truth I had forced her to face. I could hear the cracks in her voice as she tried to make sense of everything. But it wasn't my job to make her feel better. I had already given her the truth. What she chose to do with it was up to her. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. And yet, a part of me felt sickened by what had become of her life. The person I had once shared my world with was gone, replaced by a stranger who had made choices that had destroyed both our lives. I couldn't help but wonder if I had done the right thing. When I finally reached Noah again, it was almost anticlimactic. His voice was weaker than before, and I could hear the desperation in his words. He tried to play the same charming, confident role he had always done, but it was too late. The man I had once feared had crumbled, and there was nothing left but a shell of who he had been. I felt no satisfaction in his panic. Instead, I felt hollow, like the victory had turned into ashes in my mouth. "Brandon, please," he begged when I finally picked up the phone. "You don't know what you're doing. This isn't how it was supposed to go. You can't just ruin everything like this." I wanted to scream at him, tell him how much he had destroyed me, how much his lies had stolen from me. But instead, I took a deep breath and kept my voice steady. "It's too late for apologies, Noah. You had your chance. You made your choices." His voice broke, cracking under the pressure of what was happening. "Brandon, don't do this. Don't let it get out of control. We can fix this." "I'm sorry." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You don't get to say sorry. You don't get to fix anything. You've already ruined everything." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I knew he didn't know what to say next. He had run out of excuses, run out of words that could undo what had already been done. His whole life had been built on lies, And now the truth was pouring out. He had thought he was untouchable, that no one would ever challenge him. But I had made sure he felt every ounce of the betrayal he had caused. Now, it was his turn to watch everything fall apart. "I'll make sure the world knows who you really are," I said, my voice steady, controlled. "And you can't run from that." Noah tried to respond, but the words died in his throat. I ended the call without a second thought. There was no point in dragging it out anymore. I had done what I needed to do. The rest was just the fallout, the chaos they had created, and the mess I had made in the process. The next few weeks felt like an endless loop of waiting. Waiting for Noah to make his next move. Waiting for the dust to settle. Waiting for something, anything, to make sense. I couldn't escape the feeling that I had crossed a line. I had spent years building a life, trusting the people around me, believing in things that turned out to be false. I thought tearing them down would make me feel better, but it didn't. The destruction of their world only left me with more questions, more confusion, and more anger that had no outlet. I knew I had to move on, that I couldn't keep living in this cycle of revenge. But it was hard. The pain was still there, buried deep, gnawing at me every time I thought about what had happened. It wasn't about Isabella anymore, she had made her choice. It wasn't about Noah either. It was about me, and what I had allowed to happen. I had let them control me, let their betrayal become my obsession, and now I was left with nothing but the aftermath. The calm that had settled over me before had vanished. All that was left now was uncertainty. I had fought for control, and I had taken it. But what was next? What did it mean to rebuild, to move on from the wreckage? I wasn't sure. The road ahead seemed endless, full of obstacles, full of questions with no answers. I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming my life, but now it was time to figure out where to go from here. And, for the first time in a long time, I didn't have a clear answer. The days after I ended the call with Noah felt like I was standing at the edge of a precipice, looking down at the destruction I had caused, unsure if I had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. I'd done it all for a reason, I told myself. I had been betrayed, humiliated, and abandoned by the two people I thought I could trust the most. So why did it feel like the victory had slipped through my fingers the moment the dust began to settle? The phone calls, the messages, the constant flow of information, everything felt like a blur. Like I was caught in the middle of a hurricane I had started, but had no idea how to control. I'd made sure Noah's lies were exposed. I'd made sure Isabella felt the consequences of what she'd done. But the weight of it all, the weight of what I had lost, what I had torn apart, still weighed on my shoulders, like a 1,000-pound anchor. It was like I had thrown a grenade into my life. And now, I was standing amidst the rubble, watching everything I had built crumble around me. Was it worth it? Was this the kind of closure I had been looking for? I went through the motions, answering emails, taking calls, but my mind wasn't in it. I wasn't the same person I had been before all of this. I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The power I had taken back from Noah, the satisfaction I'd thought I'd feel, it didn't feel as good as I expected. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it all festered inside me. But now it wasn't enough to fuel the fire. I had wanted revenge, and I had gotten it. But at what cost? The truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. The man I had been before, the one who had trusted blindly, the one who had stood by Isabella through thick and thin, was gone. And the man who stood in front of me now, who had torn everything apart to get back what he felt he deserved, was empty. I had won, yes, but I had lost too. I had lost a part of myself along the way, and I wasn't sure if I could ever get it back. I had avoided Isabella's calls for days, not because I didn't want to talk to her, but because I didn't want to hear her excuses, her apologies. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. But still, something gnawed at me, pulling me in the direction of those messages, those calls. I couldn't avoid it forever. I couldn't avoid facing her, even if I didn't want to hear what she had to say. It was the final step, the last piece of the puzzle. But I wasn't sure I was ready for it. Finally, I gave in. I answered the phone when she called again. Her voice, soft and tentative, came through the receiver, and I could hear the cracks in it. "Brandon, I don't know what to say. I've been trying to reach you." I sighed, rubbing my hand over my face as if that might erase the fatigue in my mind. "I'm listening," I said, my voice flat. I couldn't afford to be emotional. I couldn't afford to let her see how much I was struggling. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But, I don't know. I was confused, and then Noah. He was there, and it just happened. It hurt to hear her say those words. It hurt more than I cared to admit, and I had to fight the urge to hang up the phone and walk away. But I didn't. I couldn't. Confused? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. Is that what you're telling me? That you were confused? You don't just go from loving someone to flirting with another man in front of him and call it confusion. Isabella. You made a choice. And now, you have to live with it. There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her thinking, trying to come up with the right words to say. But she had no excuse. I wasn't going to let her off the hook. I never meant for it to hurt you, she said. Finally, her voice breaking. I thought we were drifting apart, and Noah, he was there, and I made a mistake, a big one. But I want to fix it. I want to make it right. I let out a bitter laugh, a laugh that felt wrong even as it left my lips. You can't fix it. You can't just walk back into my life after what you did. You don't get to make it right, Isabella. Not anymore. She didn't say anything for a long moment. I could feel her pain, but I wasn't sure if it was real. I didn't know if I could trust her again. Part of me still wanted to believe in her, still wanted to believe that the woman I had loved was somewhere inside the one who had betrayed me. But another part of me knew that wasn't possible anymore. The trust was gone, and there was no way to get it back. I'm sorry, she whispered, the words barely audible. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I know you're sorry. But sorry isn't enough. You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. You've already shown me who you really are. And I can't just forget that. Another long silence stretched between us, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to yell, to scream at her, but I didn't. There was no point. She had already made her choice, and I had made mine. I can't do this anymore, Isabella, I said. Finally, my voice shaking with something I couldn't quite name. I can't keep holding on to something that isn't real. We're done. This is over. The words stung, and I knew they stung her too. But it didn't matter anymore. I had already let go. I had already moved on in my own way, even if it didn't feel like it. I understand, she said quietly. I understand. I never wanted to lose you, but I get it. I really do. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my office, the weight of everything I had just said sinking in. It was over. It was finally over. But as the relief began to wash over me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost something far more valuable than just a relationship. I had lost trust in people, in myself. I had lost the ability to believe in love the way I once had. It was a bitter pill to swallow. But it was mine to swallow. The storm had passed, and now, I had to find a way to rebuild whatever that meant. The only thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't go back to who I was before. I had taken control, but I had also torn my world apart. Now, I had to figure out what came next. But that, for the first time in my life, was something I wasn't sure I had the answers to. Now, you've seen it all unfold: revenge, betrayal, the truth coming out. But here's the real question. Was it enough? Did I really get back control? Or did I just end up losing more than I bargained for? You won't believe the final twist that's coming. How far would you go to get justice for a betrayal like this? Comment below and tell me, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Don't miss the shocking conclusion that will leave you speechless. Looking back on everything, I realize one thing: never let anyone control your life, especially when it comes to trust. People will disappoint you, betray you, and take advantage of your kindness. But you can't let that define you. Don't waste time on those who don't value you. It's crucial to take control of your own life, set boundaries, and know when to walk away. Respect yourself enough to know when enough is enough. Life is too short to live in the shadows of others' mistakes. Stand tall, be strong, and never let anyone take your dignity.